welcome to our 2026 Lunch and Learn panel series. It's great to be back. For those of you that don't know my name, I'm Paul Jantz. I'm our host of our panel series, and we're brought to you by Profit Master Global Outsourcing. Now, we've got a massive hour ahead, and we're going to be talking about a really big topic. I know, and I've got a real life case study to share as well. Just before we went live, I shared that with our experts, and I'll probably bring that out in discussion as well, because we're talking about tech impacts. And I think as business owners, business leaders, the offshoring platforms and company providers have been around for decades now. And this thing called AI is popping up, and there's a lot of noise out there about AI. There's a lot of noise continued noise about offshoring, and who will win the race in 2026 is the question that I've been posing. And I've got two experts here, which I'll introduce very shortly to you. Now, I was taken back by an interesting YouTube podcast I saw last week. One of my mentors, Tony Robbins, was on what's a podcast called The Diary of a CEO. And I think their host is a guy by the name of Stephen Bartlett. And it was an interesting one, again, as we led up to this particular topic, because it was around AI and the key messages around AI for leaders. And it was around AI adoption. Is it going to be people-led? Is it going to replace people? Is it going to be a tool on its own? Is it there to design workflows or ownership or decision-making? And so I thought it was a brilliant, I think it went for about 3 hours, this particular one, and I'm still about 2 and a bit hours through, so I haven't completed it. But it was I thought it was a fascinating timing when I'm running this to have this topic come out with Stephen Bartlett and Tony Robbins as well. So it's going to be an interesting topic that I'm looking forward to learning just as much as sharing with all of you that are online. Let me introduce you to our experts. It is a panel series. I've got Guy Trevis here, and I've got Michael Partis here. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing very well.
Marvelous.
Good.
Marvelous. Why wouldn't we be?
Marvelous from Brisbane.
100%. 28 degrees, bright and sunny. None of this cold, dark stuff.
Yeah, well, we've got the F1 this weekend and looking forward to the weather being really, really good. Let's get into this, gents. Let's get into this. And I suppose, Michael and I know I say this with a lot of respect, that we've got different gens here as well. So Michael and I'm a little bit older than Michael. So Michael and I are from one gen, and then we've got the new gen, which is Guy, coming from a totally different perspective as well. So I'm excited to see what the messaging is going to be as well. I know both you guys were at our conference. God, it feels like a blur, doesn't it now? Last year at Hamilton Island. And I think, again, the ability to talk about this and continue to talk about this has been outstanding. So I look forward to getting into it. So guys, let's get into tech impacts. Look, let me start by saying this debate around, let's say, technology, around to business economics and service delivery, I think that's a really important one. So Guy, I'm going to commence with you. When we talk about AI versus offshoring, what problem are businesses really trying to solve? Is it cost, capability, speed, control? What do you think?
Look, when we look at AI is plastered absolutely everywhere. I see every single website with, we do AI, and, you see billboards about AI and people posting about AI. You absolutely cannot get away from it. It is a big hype word, and we all know, and we're experiencing that. But I think that all in all, what we're like under that whole, not facade, but that layer of AI and ChatGPT and everything, we're just looking at process improvement and obviously just being able to either make the business more profitable or put the humans back in the driver's seat. A little funny story about me is I had one of the first startups in Australia that did AI automations for businesses. Now, that's a blessing and a curse, right? Because on one hand, there's no competition. On the other hand, no one has any clue what AI automation is. So you just have to pitch it, and you have to explain it, and you have to get really creative. We found that we got our first client by not talking about AI once, automation once. We just promised, we showed them what the outcome was, which was, look, your employee is going to be much more effective. Your sales channel is going to be unclogged, and you're going to be able to handle leads a lot easier. And I think that we built a sales agent. That was our first project. We did it for very cheap. But overall, you see that they weren't interested at all about the AI. They were interested about the value. And nowadays, everybody associates AI with the process improvement. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. We're looking for how do we make ourselves more efficient? How do we do the work that we want to do?
And I suppose that's what's offshoring has provided that for a very long time, hasn't it? So is this actually then a competition? Or is AI and offshoring solving different problems and challenges that we somehow have lumped together?
So actually, I wanted to challenge the who will win the race. I don't think there is a race. I think that it's a hand-in-hand sort of marathon. We're kind of using both services where we see fit. And I recently ran a workshop, and I interviewed all of the onshore team members as well as one of the offshore team members that they had. All of the onshore team members, we found processes that it made business sense to automate. At the end of the day, your payback period is X months, whatever the math was. I couldn't find one single thing that we could automate with the offshore person without it being just a ridiculous project. And I think that it's because when you look at AI and what makes AI useful, and Paul, I think it'd be awesome to lead into your story. We all know there's this agentic AI. We have this employee that just does anything, give it a task, it'll figure it all out and everything. You'll find that these are fantastic systems, and we've built them, and we continue to build them, and it depends on the use case, and they can work, but not with every problem. And I think that a lot of the times people think that by giving it all this freedom, it's going to be perfect, but actually just introduces more failure, areas, like areas of failure where it could just decide to not work as expected. You'll get a message and think to yourself like, wait, hold on, what's going on here? And then you've got the workflow approach, which is we're going to map out a workflow and then automate that workflow step by step as if you've got just this process. And obviously there's a mix of AI and automation there. Obviously, there's room for both, but what we're finding is offshore staff members, like any staff member, any human, we're inherently very free to handle many different types of tasks. And I think that that's where there's certain positions, and when I say certain, there's a lot of them, where it's going to be really hard to just throw an AI at it in a cost-effective way. And that's obviously where we want to consider staff, so humans and offshoring. You'll find that typically in account management positions, areas where it's not one task, but many tasks. You just have to be on top of many different things, many different services. And then you've got these workflows where, every month I have to do this. At the end of the quarter, I've got to do this for all of my clients. And it's the same process 80% of the time. It's the same across 80% of the clients. And so that's when you can say, okay, maybe this is the area where we introduce AI. There's obviously a need for it, but also it's going to be very, very cost effective. Running AI is practically free. So,
okay, interesting. I'll share my story in a second. Michael, have you got anything you want to add to that, mate? Before I share this interesting story that only happened only an hour ago.
Yeah, I think businesses are problematic in that they're subject to the marketing that other companies produce, right? So we hear this term AI as artificial intelligence. Now, I mean, what was beautiful about Guy's response is he's 100% right in how he's framing that piece. The difference is that the AI tools that we've got now, where he was talking about agentic AI versus automation intelligence versus all those things, you go, right, what does AI actually stand for? So most people would automatically look at AI and say it's artificial intelligence. But the fact of the matter is it's incapable of doing anything other than following your instructions at this point in time. So what we've really got to look at is what type of answers is it providing? And it's really actuarial intelligence. So it's taking averages of all of the inputs that it's seen, predicting what it's seen most frequently with how those algorithms are built, and then providing you an answer that smooths those pieces out. And so when we're talking about the difference between AI and offshoring to start with, I think about the difference between what process, repetitive process that follows an identical process 100% of the time, as Guy's described, that can be using the tool first, as opposed to having some sort of independent thought provided by a real person.
Yeah. So let me just quickly share this little story then, because I just mentioned it and Guy mentioned it as well, that I'm about to enroll. Sorry, I've enrolled my son. I was searching for a course for him to do that he has to do. Enrolled as soon as I started communicating with them through their contact page on the website. Bang! I got an automated email, and I think it said your AI client service manager. So I thought, right, straight away, it was AI generated. I thought, isn't this all interesting that what we're doing here today? So bang, went back and forth with emails. Then suddenly it was, yes, I need your son's full name, especially based on his ID. So he needs to show photo ID when he rocks up. So it has to be passport generated. So first name, middle name, surname, date of birth, phone number, email address. Today I receive a calendar invite saying that the person registered welcome, not my son Smith, but me. So Paul R. Jant, you are now registered for the workshop. Here's the calendar invite. Turn up at 9 a.m., finish it. So there's a classic example where they asked me for the details, and now and I've started to question I've gone, I know it's AI, but it's like I've started to question the company itself. So it's interesting, isn't it, Guy? Going back to what you said before.
100%. I think the biggest thing that we risk whenever we implement any new system, it's not like the failures obviously is a risk, but at the end of the day, like when you boil it all down, it's the appearance to our customer, it's the trust, right?
It's the trust.
When we implement an AI system, a lot of companies we're seeing, like, first of all, look, AI, everybody thinks it's ChatGPT, right? You hear, yeah, we've got AI, and then you ask what they have, and it's just Copilot, right? But you can zoom out because there's just so many different solutions that you can implement. And I think that when you look at what companies are doing, they need to consider it's not just a matter of accuracy and risk and compliance. It's also just a matter of how are we going to appear in front of our clients. Like, will they trust us if this makes a mistake? Will they continue to support us once they see that it's AI? Like there's all sorts of questions that you have to ask, and obviously it's different for every industry. But I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a matter of trust, and now you're going to think twice about the next thing. And if they ask you about any more information, you're going to pick up the phone. Hey, like, look, I sent it through. Can you just confirm? That's creating more work. It's not. It's just going to now you're going to have more people on the phone. So yeah, it's interesting. It's a very interesting way to look at it.
It is. And that's probably what I was considering just then. It's like, do I now have to pick up the phone and call them because they've got their system that they've got is incorrect? So it's interesting. I'll deal with that anyway afterwards. Michael, it's an interesting one when we talk about offshoring, because offshoring has underpinned business growth for decades now. I know probably started with the telcos probably decades ago. But what makes offshoring such a durable model compared to AI solutions?
Well, I think there's sort of two different questions rolled into one there, right? Because the first part is what's happened? Why did Australian businesses start using offshore models to begin with? And I think it was very much a case of, great, it's cheaper to employ people, particularly in Asia, to necessarily deliver some of that low value work, or what was considered low value work, in businesses that weren't particularly intimacy focused, right? So they didn't really care so much about person-to-person relationships because they had too many clients, right? Especially when we're starting to talk about telcos, right?
Yep.
So I think that there's a degree of Australian businesses have evolved. Their relationship with Asia has also evolved. And while that was occurring, the offshoring system also evolved. So what you've got is two systems evolving at the same time. So especially in Australia, we've seen long traction on that because the development of technologies, a lot of technologies that we now find ubiquitous, like this platform here, for instance, that have emerged only in the last sort of 15 years, realistically, that are as capable as they are now. We've had two different business systems, the Australian business community and offshore businesses as an industry, the offshore industry, actually evolving at the same time. And so when you think about when people were doing that in Australia, people of our generation who were the early adopters here, as opposed to the early adopters that have such a large younger population base in some of those Asian countries in particular, what you're seeing is two sets of people willing to grow in industries that were evolving, in business environments that were evolving. And I think that is what's made it so stable. AI is right at that very part of the infancy of this process, right? Nobody really knows how to use it. Nobody knows what they're doing. Credit to Guy, is the first person to launch it in Australia, and he is next gen, right? Like, as opposed to us being old gen on that front. So when you start looking at all of those pieces together, you can say we're really just on the beginning of a journey where all businesses are evolving at the same time to deliver that outcome.
Okay. Well, both of you guys are, obviously, Mark, you and I have probably got a little bit more grey hair. Have you got grey hair?
Oh, yeah, well, it's hidden in all my redness.
And obviously, guys at the other end. But to be fair, we've all run businesses, open businesses. So let's look at it from a different perspective and a different lens, I suppose, when we look at, it was brought up before with regards to cost, productivity, and probably more importantly nowadays with margin pressures as well. So, Michael, I'm going to stick with you for a sec. And we spoke about this before in terms of offshoring was the fastest way to probably reduce costs because of the margin pressures we had. Now AI is seeming, and I think Guy touched on it before, that some of these things are free as a cheaper alternative. Is it a cheaper alternative or is it just a different cost structure?
I think it's a different cost structure. I don't think it's necessarily cheaper. I think the same difficulties that we had with toll-based phone numbers to begin with, if I can demonstrate our age there a little bit more, is you had people that uncontrollably spend in those places because they don't understand how the cost structures work. So let's look at it to begin with as different risks that you've got to take into consideration, right? So productivity can only be enhanced if you're engaging the human, like a guy, or an offshoring mob to help you identify what it is you're actually trying to ask. Yep. So what we did was we can afford in the old days to give it to lots of people in a different place because they can figure out what an easier solution is and then bring it back to us. And we didn't have to worry about it. We could concentrate on our clients locally onshore, right? So what our concerns were at that particular point, hey, is their English good enough? What does this look like? Where is it actually coming from? Time differences, blah, 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 right? All those sorts of things. Now what we're talking about is different risk parameters entirely. Are we asking the right questions to get those answers? How does that model work? Do we really understand what we do as a business to enable us to decide which resources are best when we're doing those pieces? So I keep looking at this whole, who's capable of asking a question? Surely it's not something that is giving us an answer to a question that it's predicting based on what we've written rather than what we want to know. And I think Guy will be the first to turn around and say, the only way you can get true leverage out of even the co-pilots and the other platforms, if you're just using those chatbot type AI pieces, is to know what question you want to ask. So I think it's the risk structures that change around how we run our business or how we understand our business that become vital in understanding where those risks lie.
Sorry, Guy, you go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like when I think of cost structures, like going back to that point of what does that actually look like? Is it more expensive, cheaper, different? I think like any employee, again, like offshoring at the end of the day, they're just another employee, right? Obviously at a cheaper cost, but it's another employee. Like any employee, you know that you're paying them X dollars a month and then they're just with you, right? And I think that for a lot of, like for ages, that's just how it is. You know that if you want to scale your business, you need to scale out your headcount naturally, right? With AI and with automation, I think what we're seeing now is that you can still grow, and it's not about cutting down the team size, not at all, but it's just about asking yourself, do I really need a human here? Or should I invest in an AI or an automation system, like an automated system to do this job instead? And the logic there needs to be super, super simple. It's how much time are we spending on this process? If I wanted to scale now, if I doubled my leads and I wanted to close all of them and scale, how many more employees will I need? Where are the first areas that are going to break? Like, the classic bottleneck simulation, right?
Yep.
And then you ask yourself, like, is this a position where I'm risking, by putting an AI automation system, am I risking lack of trust, accuracy, whatever it is? And of course, like, you might not be able to answer that yourself, like whoever's listening, but that's sort of the conversation you want to have. And then on the flip side, it's like, okay, well, where can I actually introduce these systems where we're not introducing more work for our staff, we're just freeing them up for all the other stuff that has to happen with scale. And so I think AI, like we're looking at it, is it, like what the cost structure, is it expensive, cheap, blah, blah, blah. I think it's upfront more expensive because you're going to have to build something if you're building custom. But over time, it basically, if you're building custom, you don't always have to build custom. But over time, the run costs are going to be a lot cheaper than a human salary. And you know that the actions are also a lot more, I don't want to say accurate, but just like it follows the process to a T. And so for certain processes, that's really important. And so it's not always about cost, but also, again, it's that whole idea of risk and, like with compliance, like you have to do certain things every month, every year, every quarter, whatever it is. If you've defined it once, it's not an employee that can then leave and then, like you have to retrain somebody again. You've defined it into a process, except the employee that was previously doing it is now managing these AI agents, these digital employees, you can think of them.
Yep, yep. And I think your point just before, I just wrote it down to certain processes, and sort of Michael touched on it as well just before in terms of making sure. And my case is where my brain's going. My case is a classic where they got that process wrong. So they've obviously taken it as an example from my email address as opposed to the name, which was Smith Dane Jantz instead of Paul R. Jantz, because that's a where a human probably would not have made that mistake because they would have taken it directly from.
Correct.
So they're the little nuances that we probably need to continue to throw around and make sure we get right, because you're right. Certain processes is probably the nail on the head, because not everything, if anything that requires a little bit of, hang on, just look that way and make sure you got the name right, well, that may not get picked up. And this is the classic case that it didn't.
And I think from that perspective, like whenever we approach any project, it's all, again, I'm speaking from experience, like how do we build these systems? How do we integrate these systems? There's always requirements gathering at the start. You can never, like, I tell clients, like everybody, treat me like I'm your junior employee. Just teach me. And whether it's me or another business analyst in the team, it's how would you explain this job, whether it's, doing an end of month review for all of your clients, or whether it's, qualifying a lead and then sending it to your sales manager. Like, how would you explain this to a junior? And then we take all of your explanations that you would train a junior with, and we train a system, right? We build a system, and you don't have to understand how to build a system, but from your perspective, where you're training us and we're training the system through us. So yeah, yeah, really good point. You have to understand the process, exactly what you're looking at achieving before you start automating. Otherwise, you're just introducing more risk failure.
Yep.
Can I just add two extra pieces to that, Paul, on the risks piece? So there's two big risks that I know no one's taking into consideration. One I'm going to give you as a human example in terms of the automation that big banks did and the processes that were built to automatically do their AUSTRAC reporting. And then no one ever looked at those reports and didn't check to make sure that they were passed on to that. That is not the automation tools problem. That is the human problem for not understanding what was going on
100%.
because it became invisible to them. So that part of their process got lost, and then they got into a whole heap of grief that put them all over the media. So that's sort of example one. Example two is where you're automating a process where you're accessing information through another businesses API, so the little bits of code to connect to them to pull information from there. If their terms and conditions specifically prohibit you from using those types of tools in order to collect that information, which is more common than people understand, because these technology businesses have already implemented changes to their terms to do that, you could be seen in serious breach of those and lose your right to access them, and then be sued as a consequence of that. So the devastation cost of that, of not being prepared when you're talking to somebody like Guy, so that Guy's building your tool, again, is not that their fault. It's you not understanding your supply chain consequences of going through that process. So they're just two additional risks that I know very few people think about before they go down that path.
Yep, and I know you and I have spoken about this from a risk point of view for probably a couple of years now. From a privacy perspective, is that where you were coming from?
And that is part of it. It's also about corporate intellectual property.
Yeah. Yep,
right.
yep.
So there's that as well that goes with it.
So leaders need to be company directors and leaders need to be aware of all of that when they're taking this automation into consideration. It's probably fair to say.
100%. It doesn't change the efficacy of the tool. So don't get me wrong, and I'm not suggesting you shouldn't go down that way, but they certainly need to be more prepared rather than going, I can get rid of this mundane task to somewhere else and then forget about it.
Just going off script for a minute, and I'll probably do this quite a bit because I see this sometimes as, and I think going back to both your points, guys, which was if you're looking to grow, this could be seen as a labor leverager as well. What do we, as team members sitting out there at the moment that is watching this happen, and it's moving pretty quick, and there's a lot of noise about it, and there's a lot of people talking about it. What do the leaders and owners say to their current team members that may be in fear of being replaced? I said I was going
to yeah. So I think let me take it a step back, right? when going back to that initial startup that we did, like that whole initiative with AI automation, before anybody knew about it, we thought a lot about what we were doing because like everybody's thinking like, are we getting replaced? Or what's happening? Like, is AI taking my job? And I think we really came to our thesis, and I'm not kidding. Like, we would spend days talking about it. We ended up doing a workshop. One of the other co-founders, his family has a farm, so we literally just spent days on this farm doing a full workshop. Who are we? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? And we ended up coming to the conclusion that it's not about replacing, it's just about enhancing 10x. And I'll explain why. And it's not just this like fairy tale delusion. In front of you, you've got 10 businesses, right? Let's say 5 of them implement AI and then cut down staff. And then 5 of them implement AI, but then maintain their staff and continue to scale their staff. Over time, which company, which business is going to be more more scalable, successful, have a larger market share? Like logically, right? It's the people that aren't looking at, okay, let's axe and cut down on everything. Like, sure, like, am I going to say there's never going to be any replacements from AI? Like, of course there will be. And, we have to accept that there's going to be, there used to be lamp lighters on the street, lighting lamps before electricity. Like, there's going to be a displacement of jobs to a certain degree. But at a higher level, I'd like to argue that businesses, it's a smarter decision to use this technology to help you scale, to help you grow, instead of just axe down and gut your own company just because you can cut down. And you can kind of think of it like, if you think of your business capacity as a glass of water, right? You can tip out all of the water, as much of the water as you can, and that's all you're ever going to see, that little bit that you tipped out, right? Alternatively, if you're not looking at axing and gutting and you're saying, look, I want to use this technology to scale, or to at least not have to hire too much more than what we currently are and increase our profitability, then you're not tipping out water, you're just getting a bigger glass, you're getting a bucket instead, right? And just growing your capacity. And so that was our theory for the longest while. And I know it's a very long-winded response, but I think as a business owner, I think that you obviously at the end of the day, you've got to make your own decision. I can't speak for everybody. But my personal belief is that it's a smarter decision to look at scale and to look at how do we become more profitable and not have to go through the hell of training up a new staff member again for 6 months for them to be at the same level of what your current staff members are, and actually just reallocate them to positions that are more, like Michael was saying, more intimate, more valuable, more like where can we bill more? Like, and there's going to be that restructuring. But yeah, so I think I took up quite a while with that, Michael. Maybe you've got something here as well.
Look, I like the idea of the commercial scalability piece, but for most professional services businesses, and I know that most of the people on today are professional services businesses, you're not winning business, you're not scaling, you're not growing by doing the AI. You might be able to leverage some productivity. You do that by having relationships with your clients.
Correct.
Invest your money in your clients. Don't invest your money in those pieces if you understand your business process. If you go, what do I do in the meantime? Well, I've got this little bit of a productivity hop with where the generation of technology currently is and the value that it provides, because the industry, the AI industry, has no idea how to charge for the things that it's delivering at the moment, because it's got absolutely no idea. It's dependent entirely on private equity capital to get to where it is and burning through buckets of cash, right? That no one really knows how to create a revenue model out of AI yet. So there's another big risk somewhere down the track. But if you're taking that pause, now's your chance before you invest in that piece to actually understand what those business processes are. I mean, Guy's been really specific in this call about, hey, you've got to treat me like a new kid on the block so that I can understand how your business works. And even if you're using offshore teams, which I hope people are, to help deliver the scale and that efficiency and efficacy that they're delivering, if they've got a little bit of a hop in productivity, use that time to get them to help you analyze those processes. Because only people ask smart questions about your business, the machines can't.
It's a very, very good point, because I know even some of the stuff that, and I think I like the approach that you've taken, Guy, with coming back to that AI automation. So what can we automate? But it's still going to require, I still know some of the stuff that we've automated as well, it still requires the human to make sure that it's correct before
One
that. So
Yeah, like there's a very big term in the industry called human in the loop. You know, it literally means you again, it's how do you zoom out and put your junior as a some sort of middle manager of all of these tools, because at the end of the day, like we want to review stuff. You know, your company is liable. Like if you're using AI to do something, you don't check it. It's like there was that case of lawyers who used ChatGPT to draft up like an argument or whatever it was, and in the end they saw that ChatGPT just hallucinated and included a bunch of fake cases. And like, you know, the judge was looking at it, was like, well, this case doesn't exist. Like, where'd you get this from? And they were outed for using ChatGPT. Like, that's just ridiculous, you know? Like you know, it's just like any other junior. Like, which lawyer would have a junior prepare a full case and then just go like that? And there you go, I'm gonna risk the whole reputation of the brand I've been building for 20 years. Like, it's just, you know, so people really have to think, look, this is a junior, a very quick, cheap, effective junior, but it's good at certain things. And there's certain things that it just isn't, it's not built for, and it doesn't make sense to use for. So yeah.
And I suppose there's just, again, I'll come back to our script, but just going off script again. Because I know I do this as well. I'm sure other people do this. So don't, if you go online and you're watching this, don't tell me you don't do this. But you're right. We go on, we do research, because that's one of the great things that AI does for us, whether we're using ChatGPT or not. And the lawyer case is a really interesting one. How do you validate where that comes from?
So it's actually it's a great question, and I think it depends on whether you look at it as a individual or as a company. And the reason I bring that up is there's two different ways. So as an individual, if you're just using ChatGPT and you're asking ChatGPT a question, ChatGPT, like I'm sure you guys know, it sources information. You'll just get a link of where it got that info from. So if it's something super important and you just have to make sure it's right, and it's not one of those like, yeah, draft me an email and whatever. I would recommend you just go click through those links, actually make sure it's understanding. It's probably got it right. If it's referencing a link, it's probably got it right, but it's better safe than sorry if we're an important. Yeah. Correct. When you're building enterprise applications, so company applications for organizations, you know, a lot of the times you need the AI to kind of have that awareness to check itself. And that's when you kind of go like a little bit deeper and you build these verifier systems that their only job is to verify what the main system said. And then you have to build, you know, like for another example is like we did a deployment for an enterprise for a knowledge-based system. It has 50 years of data and you can ask any question and then it will retrieve it from their SharePoint and what else. We made sure that absolutely any single claim that is made, there is a source, a link to the original file, not a website, but like the actual file that, you know, it could be an old file from 10 years ago on SharePoint, right? But that means that it's very, very verifiable. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's not about, you know, how do I know that I can just trust it 100%, just like click it, make sure that it's accurate. It's just about how do I have the resources to check that it is 100%, especially for the stuff that genuinely matters. And I think that's what's important. How do I see that trace, that verifiability? Yeah. And then of course there's ways like to tweak and make it a little bit better. Like the prompt is super important. Michael mentioned that, like, how do you ask the right question? But yeah, like I think the biggest thing is just the verifiability.
Very, very good point, isn't it? There's so many little things in there that we just need to be aware of. And that's why sometimes, you know, like I've been on so many, I mentioned the Tony Robbins one before, but that's led me to so many other information sources to learn more. And that's probably why everyone is on this as well, to go, right, what do I need to do? Where do I need to know? What do I need to de-risk? You know, we've spoken about client risk, risks total. We've spoken about the legal case there with the judge. Really interesting stuff, isn't it? So you've just got to make sure that you're cross-referencing as much as you can to reduce that risk at the same time.
100%.
Let's get into some talent and capabilities, and it's probably an interesting one here, Michael. You've been involved again in a lot of businesses, and I think you're continually building Ashore Global Plus and all your other side projects as well. But you know, can you see offshoring becoming less again about cost and more about access to global talent? Because I think, you know, that's still another challenge we've got here with a lot of different industries, isn't it?
I think that there's two components to this, right? So the first one is evolution of offshoring, I think, has gone from being a cost-focused buy from us because we're cost effective to now being a value add perspective.
Yes.
Right. With the number of organizations that are now offering qualified staff, fully qualified Australian staff on those pieces. And this is actually going to be really important to my next bit. They're fully qualified to work in Australia, right? To operate and be part of the Australian system is so fundamentally important for context. So I think that shift actually happened a while ago. And where we're seeing it not being adopted so much on that way, that it's still looking at a cost piece, is that we're looking at smaller businesses who've never had the opportunity to be exposed to the knowledge or exposed to the expertise around them because they've been concentrating on growing and building and delivering stuff for their clients. So I think that there has been a massive shift there. So I think the cost versus value piece is actually something that's evolved over time to deliver that outcome. The second component to that is where should trust lie in those pieces? And I was giggling, I've written myself down a word so I could come back to it before. And this is where sort of Guy is more of an acolyte than I am for some of the AI pieces. Hallucination. I mean, what a crock of nonsense of a word to do with the fact that the algorithm has predicted wrongly, right? So what's happened is because it's a predictive algorithm and every letter is predicted after that based on whatever you put in the context panel, with the way whoever has designed it in another country to begin with, and let's talk about the US as an example here, then all of those answers are going to be influenced by where the volume of work that's available to it has come from. So if everyone says that there is no more knowledge to be contributed in the universe, everything that's ever been written is in there, and I can only assume that's just Western knowledge based on how they've loaded it in. Australia's contribution of content in that space is going to be so small. If you can't accurately define where those pieces are, then your value that you're going to get out of that system is going to be weaker than the value you can get out of a group of people who are qualified to work in your space.
Yeah. Very interesting.
I think it's very funny. Like the word hallucination. Like I've been like, yeah, it's always been funny to me. Like as somebody who's more technical, I always see how they like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot, like all of these tools try to make it seem like it's just your friend that's thinking and everything. And like, you've got all these thinking modes and all this stuff. But yeah, like Michael's right. At the end of the day, like if you treat it as this is a tool that is just going to answer the most statistically relevant response at the end of the day, then you can kind of like look. It's hard to visualize until you just test it with that in mind. But you'll see that that's just like there's certain things that it's not good for. And like I'll give you a perfect example. I think I was telling you, Paul, about this actually about a year ago. Just over a year ago, there was a funny trend going around about the glass of wine problem with AI image generators. And basically, what would happen is we would, anybody would ask an AI image generator to generate a glass of wine filled to the brim, right? And the AI just literally could not generate an image of a full glass of wine because it's only been trained on glasses being full, which is obviously to that halfway point. I mean, which maniac fills a glass all the way to the top, right? But seriously, like it's only been trained on images of it being filled up to the full, which is the halfway, and then it couldn't generate it filled to the brim. It just wasn't able to. So it goes to show it's not thinking. It's not the same mode of like, hey, I'm thinking about it really hard and this is what it would look like. To me, it's super obvious, but to the AI, it didn't see it before, so it couldn't generate an answer that was what you wanted. So that's an extreme, of course, but if you keep that in mind a little bit, you kind of see that there's other use cases where, again, it might not be the use case for AI, and you're more likely to go down that offshoring or human touch point.
Yeah, I remember that one on the red wine or the wine, and it is interesting, isn't it? Because it's sort of like, what do you mean? Because logically, it's like, well, we know, but that's not how it's been built or the images. So
Exactly,
it is very interesting. Guys, with regards to, I know offshoring again, whether it was outsourcing or it was offshoring. I know certainly in the industry that I've been a part of for 20 odd years now, 25 years, the accounting industry, we had to disclose that, not we, but accountants had to disclose, whether it was through CPA or CANZ or IPA, that they were using an offshore provider or an outsourced provider. They had to disclose that to their clients. If you're going down this road now with AI, do you feel like you need to disclose AI to clients?
I think it's a mix of both. I think from a compliance perspective, like, I'm full of examples today, right? But healthcare, like you want data in healthcare to be processed on Australian soil. So naturally, that means you can't use an American AI provider in the sense of I can't just go to ChatGPT and put in all the data. Like I will be breaching the compliance requirements, right? Putting the business at risk. Now that's another story. A lot of businesses, a lot of humans are already doing that, right? So that's yeah, I could go on for ages about the risks of that. But from a build perspective, from a system perspective, it's really important that you design the solution to use models that are hosted in Australia. So, for example, there's instances of ChatGPT that are hosted in Australia. So the build has to be using those instances. Like it just has to be compliant. And so I think whether we disclose the use of AI or not, I think currently it's a bit discretionary. I think like, an example would be if it is going offshore and you have to disclose that it is, then you might say, hey, we're sending data offshore, like whether it's to a human or to the AI that's hosted offshore, right? And then I think it comes back to that perception of brand. I mean, you could be, disclosing like this is an AI and, like you've got that AI helper and that's a business decision because then you might get a bit more leniency with a stupid mistake, like using the dad's name instead of the son's name. But also there's the counter argument of, does this then devalue the service, right? Like, does it feel less like, do I want to pay less because I know an AI is doing it, Like and that's something I've been battling with. Like if I know that an AI is doing something, do I feel like should I be paying the typical rate for it? And I think, yeah. And I think, look, I mean, yeah, that I don't know yet. I don't have an answer for it. And that's why I think it's a decision for the business to whether or not they want to disclose that they're using AI. I think as long as you're compliant, it's not me personally, I don't think it's something that you need to toss and turn over. Just make a decision based off the pros and cons, and then you should be fine. But again, maybe Michael has a different opinion. I'm not kind of speaking for myself here.
I definitely have a different opinion. I'm a 100% disclose. If you're not disclosing your relationships with service providers, because they're a service provider, right? Ultimately, they're built by somebody else. You're accessing their particular models and systems. In all professional services businesses, when we refer them to somebody else, we have to explain or detail and disclose what our relationship is with those. So we can't be compromised on secret commissions, on basis bias pricing, on basis on all of those bits and pieces. So I would always disclose so that if there is a data breach, for whatever reason, no matter where the source is, no matter what that looks like, you are at least making your client aware of it. Because then they have the option, if they want to say, no, I don't want you using AI tools, great, but there might be an increase in cost because there's more person power required in order to deliver that service.
So I've got a quick question here, actually, because this is interesting. So, say for example, my business uses HubSpot, right? And I use HubSpot, and I use Outlook, and I use Xero, and I use whatever else. And then Xero has a massive, or Optus, I don't know, Optus has a massive data leak, or whatever it is, right? There's a data leak every day now. It might like and seriously, I could, this is a question, like a legitimate question. Do you disclose I use HubSpot, I use Xero, I use this to all of your clients? Or is it more like these are the tools of the trade, I don't need to disclose them necessarily?
That's a fair question. What I'd be disclosing is that AI tools are used to process some of your data. So you're not having to disclose exactly what services you're using.
Yeah.
You should definitely be talking about it. If there is AI involved in processing some of that data, then you have the risk of a leak because it's not hosted on your own platform, on your own servers. So you are processing information through another source, even if it's onshore. Through that, you should be disclosing that you are using AI to process some or all of it, depending on what those circumstances are. But you don't have to go down to brand, no.
Yeah. So naturally, like, is this, and again, like I'm genuinely now, like I'm interested in this. So would you say then naturally with all of the other systems that you would be using, like, would you have to disclose, hey, we use a cloud-based, like CRM or like stuff like to what extent? Because at the end of the day, like if we look at it objectively, whether AI processes it or whether it's stored on HubSpot or whatever it is, like it's always off, like there's always that extra vendor. So how do you draw the line between, look, it's like, like AI, but also just in general, like HubSpot just had a data leak. Like, would you need to disclose, would you say it's fair to say to disclose, look, we use like cloud-based tools and AI or something like that? Did you sort of get what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%. So the Australian Signals Directorate, so basically ASIO, have spent a
Yep.
bucket load of time trying to figure this out. So the Essential 8 guidelines that were promised to us forever ago, which the ASD released because they got tired of waiting for the government to specifically legislate them, specifically talk about how you need to manage the information that you've got to identify the points
Yeah.
where it leaked so that you can't be responsible for the leak if it occurs at a processing place.
Got
So
it. That makes sense.
I think what you're asking is a really good question. But for individual businesses, especially those on this call, what I'd be looking at is how do you ensure that the data that you process is secure as possible? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
often
No,
you get
fair
really hard
point.
to do. But if you're using AI tools specifically, I think that that's a different form of disclosure because ultimately, depending on how they update those tools, you have to then reapply the privacy resets because, of course, they remove all of those you can't learn from my data pieces every time they update those processes.
Invaluable learning right there. Brilliant. Love it. Now we're sitting at 1:17. So we are going to start taking questions. For whatever reason, I've just noticed that there is no Q&A bar. So if you've got anything you want to throw into the chat bar on some of the topics that we've spoken about in particular, please throw some. I saw a question in before. Oh, it was a comment from Scott. So again, if you've got any questions, I'm going to quickly throw to our team. I know there's a quick poll and I've got a couple of last questions to ask as well. So if I could just request team, if you want to launch that poll, please, that'd be great. So there's a few things coming out here that, again, just to gather some intelligence, which I think would be good for us and for you to think about as well with some of the questions that are coming out. So I'd love you guys to jump on that poll and answer that for us. As we go to that, guys, I've got some just a couple of questions with regards, or a couple of final questions, I suppose. So if you were, let's say you were building a business from scratch today. I know, Michael, you've probably commenced that maybe 12 months ago, maybe not today, but a couple of things that you're involved with. Would you start offshore first or would you go with AI first, and why?
I'd be inclined to use AI first to help understand whether I understand what I'm doing. Right.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
where it is actually really useful, and we use a lot of AI tools in a couple of my businesses. But the fun part is I've got to spend more time teaching my team how to ask a question. Like for anyone who's got an undergraduate degree, you spend the first 2 years of your professional qualification learning how to ask a question,
Yep.
not actually what the answer is. So what you've got to do is actually understand what processes you need, what should they look like in order to facilitate the outcome, especially if it's innovative that you want to deliver. Use AI to help you understand what you're asking, because then you know what language you need to use in terms of helping. If you're getting a better quality answer out of it, then you're probably asking yourself better questions if you're starting from scratch. Yes. Once you understand what that process is, then you can stay on top of how you can leverage the value that offshoring can create.
Okay. Guy, any thoughts on that?
I actually fully agree. I think like if you're starting a new business, AI first, it's just, again, it's very cheap to test stuff out. It's a manual like every out of the box solution, there's going to be some sort of manual tweaking with it, but it's just a very easy way to start, testing the waters and seeing what you can get a cheap ChatGPT intern for $20 and just give it a go. That being said, I think if you have a business and you're looking at where do I go now? Like, do I go offshore? Do I go AI? Again, I think it's a mix of both. You need to understand, and this is where I would recommend, and again, this isn't a pitch or something, but we run workshops for businesses to help them figure out, because you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, how are you meant to know this is where I put AI, this is where I put offshores? So, like, whether it's me or whether it's someone else that you meet that knows about AI, I think it's really important to just have someone ask you the questions that then help you decide where you want to go. And sometimes there's value in just sticking to offshore because it's just so many different pieces and building the system is going to be too expensive. Other times it makes sense to do a hybrid, and other times it makes sense to do just AI. So yeah, I think that would probably be my answer. Okay.
Last question before we go to our group of people that are there. Have we got any questions coming through? Yeah, there's a couple coming through, which is great. So leaders, we're all leaders. What do you do to stay competitive for the next 12 months?
I can start, or you, Michael.
Go for it. You go for it.
All right, over the next 12 months. So for me, it's actually interesting because we do AI. So I think we need to stay on top of it a lot more than other companies do. For example, like for us, the difference between GPT 5.2 and 5.3, like we've got to be on it, you know. Whereas for a lot of businesses, it's just another update. You know, it's like updating from Windows 11.6 to 11. You know, it's like whatever. And I think that for us, what we've been doing is we've been allocating time. Like, and I know this isn't a new concept, but every single one, like person on our team, has time in the week to test out new tools. And now these tools for us, it's more about not just delivery, but kind of just, you know, ensuring that we know, okay, this model is good for this model is good for that. It keeps us ahead of the game in the area that we need to be ahead of the game. I think from a like now stepping back and thinking where everybody else is, you're not an AI or software company. Like, how do you sort of get that competitive edge and stay on top of what you need to stay on top of? I think there's some really good newsletters that you can subscribe to. Like we've got a newsletter, you know, like there's so many newsletters that you can find information about people that do stay on top of the technology. And then again, even if you don't implement, it's good to have in the back of your mind. I think also you really need to ask yourself, like, not when, sorry, not how and if will I get this AI, but more so when do I look at integrating AI? Because I think that every business is going to need some form of AI at some point, even if it's just ChatGPT. I think that you're going to lose that edge if you don't. But that being said, you also have to ask yourself, what is it good for? And don't try squeeze, you know, like the death of an AI project or any project in software is you try and force it. Like, how do I get AI in the business? And it's not meant to be about how do I force a project. It's meant to be where can I genuinely experience value out here. And sometimes the answer is offshoring. And that's just, you know, sometimes the answer is we don't do anything because the cost of acting is just vastly more than the cost of inaction, which is ironic, but sometimes that's the case. And yeah, I think that would be what I would say. Like, just stay in the loop in general, but also ask yourself really, like, do I need it? Why do I need it? And make a business case. Yeah.
Well said. Michael, you got thoughts?
Depending on what you feel is inclusive around global talent, and I don't see any reason why AI would not be considered part of a talent pool on that front. I think the first thing that you've got to do is go, given the current business environment in Australia, given the cost pressures that we're likely to go under and the likely rate increases we are, I think, inevitably going to see with some of the international tensions around, one of the big questions we should be doing is actually, well, one of the big questions we should be asking is what is going to most impact my business's productivity tomorrow? And tomorrow being whatever tomorrow looks like for that business. Yeah. If you understand what your outcome is, then you can start to unpack how you get there. And as I said, I think that we've probably demonstrated in this that there isn't really one right solution for this piece, but coupled together, yes, you can actually unpack a lot more very quickly. And I keep coming back to the same thing. I think the biggest impact on the global talent pool in the next little while is not having professionally qualified people in our businesses, but having people who understand how to ask questions. So I think the dirge of the university system that everyone's always thought about is, hey, art students contribute nothing, but they spend their entire undergraduate degree learning how to ask questions and then figure out how to ask, figure out what the answers are. So when you're starting to use these sorts of tools and you're starting to explore what that looks like, understand the difference between somebody being able to react and respond to your thing in an innovative way themselves, as opposed to helping you get a better answer out of a global knowledge system to deliver better quality answers than what you're currently receiving because you're getting greater specificity.
I like it. Well said, guys. Thank you. Let's go to some questions. So Scott said, glad to hear Guy mention that AI and offshoring are not in a race. Yeah. People have capabilities to optimize and AI tech should be viewed as enablers. Yeah, good point. Question here from Hazel. How do we stay on top of these updates to the AI tools, ensuring privacy settings remain? And how can we be sure it's a closed platform like Perplexity?
My learning on that for
Yeah.
the non-technologically literate. As I suspect most of us wish we were more technologically literate, like Guy. But when you start turning around and look at that, is to regularly check the settings. Is like I literally make it a task for me and my team once a week. They go in and make sure that information has been, if there has been an update. Some are really good. So, for instance, I look at Perplexity and it's actually pretty good at telling you that it's updated, because it's about the LLMs that updated. If you're working on one and suddenly you find that the answers suddenly become much higher quality, chances are they probably had an update to what they've done and tweaked some things behind the scenes. So I think that there's some hints you can probably get around what that looks like. But if you just make it part of your routine, or your AI or your IT person, if you've got an internal one or an external one, make sure that they're conducting that on a routine basis around, hey, checking to make sure when those things happen and that those flags that are important to you are checked in their various capacities.
Well said. Well said. And I think that's just a continuing challenge, isn't it, for everybody, just to make sure that you're right. Depending on the platforms you're using, and it's a very, very good question from Hazel there, just to make sure that. So you said weekly.
That's the minimum I do weekly.
Yeah.
I know when my systems stop working as efficiently, and we understand how many random things that I've got going at any given point. I find that my system starts to break down when there's an update waiting to load that I wasn't aware of. And so I have to shut everything down, do the update on whatever it happens to be, and then
Yes.
go in before I do anything else and check all of the programs are still resetting to where they need to be.
Yep. Yep.
So I think, Michael, I agree with that point. I think it's always good to be on top of it yourself, especially when at the end, look, you're managing a business, right? Like you're depending, it's like any business, like, I'm sure you'd call up your supply chain and if it was warehousing and stock, right? So at that point as well, like at the end of the day, it's a digital supply chain. I think also, again, I've said the newsletter, I think subscribe to some good newsletters. Like there's a lot of people that get AI a lot more than you would, like anybody who's listening. And it's like, if you subscribe to those newsletters, then at least you know that you have that extra opinion. And like for us, I mean, it's funny because like, again, we're an AI software company, right? So we have the luxury of building certain tools, but we've built our own tool that we call the Radar. And literally we get pinged, like any build that we do for anybody, we know which tools that we're using and we have a full classification about it. And we literally get told like there's an update, there's a downtime, there's this, there's that. So we always have like, it's more, instead of being reactive, we're very proactive. We get told and then we instantly act on it. Now obviously like it's that not everybody can have something like that, but it's, if you have a newsletter, you can kind of like, you can still be a little bit proactive. Like it's fairly reactive, but a little bit more proactive than what, and I think like a mix of all three of those would probably put you in a very good position to just staying on top. And look, this world changes so quickly, like so quickly, like it's GPT 5.3 just released, I think yesterday night. Which will have like, there's all sorts of cool updates there. Like it's not going to stroke your ego as much. They've made it less cringe. That was literally in the patch notes. But like, yeah, like, like it's hard to stay on top. Like it's my job to stay on top of it. And still I'm finding myself like, man, it's a lot. So I think I relate to everybody when they ask, how do you do it? Because it's a challenge.
Quick question before we shut down, from James. JK, good to hear from you, mate. We've talked a bit about offshoring versus AI, but the thoughts to the panel about offshoring firms using AI to deliver a better service to us, the customer. What are they seeing, and what should offshore firms be doing / investing in? Good question.
I'm personally seeing plenty of it. I don't really have a problem with it, provided your terms allow that to occur, that your privacy pieces that you're required to deliver for your clients and your regulators and everything like that are okay with that as well. And what should they be investing in? You should be asking them how they're bumping up their data security.
I think like whether you're an offshoring business or whether you're a plumbing business, I think the premise needs to stay the same in the sense of what processes can I use AI to just, like, at the end of the day, like you're an offshoring business, you're gonna have processes internally anyways, like it shouldn't be like this, like just use it. Like the technology is here. I think it makes sense to just understand where you can use it and also where you want to keep the human. And it's different for every business. You speak to two accounting firms, you're going to have different processes and different, they might prefer humans being on a lot more account management stuff. Others might prefer, humans are on, I don't know, reviews. I mean, you have one account manager, like, it just depends on the structure. But like, I think it's the same premise. Like, what process can you look at using for AI? And then like, where would you see the value? And don't try to force it. Like, you don't need to force it.
Good point. Well, gentlemen, thank you. Guy, thank you very much. Michael, thank you. To all of you guys that have joined us, we've just clicked over the hour. So again, thank you. Thanks for the questions, the participation, the knowledge. I think the more we keep talking about this, the better it's going to be. As long as we've got, I think a lot of the key notes that I wrote down here in terms of automation and processes and scale and growing and leveraging, I think they're really, really important. So to all of you guys that joined us, we hope you got value out of this. Comments, views, thoughts, really, really important. If you want to come back to us and ask us more, actually, Guy and Michael, again, they're available. If you want to contact them, what's the best way to contact you guys? LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn or just the website, kipanga.com. Yeah, either one.
You can even ring me.
Well, guys, thank you again. Again, a fantastic 60 minutes. We really appreciate your time. Guy and Michael, thank you to all of you guys. Thanks again. Signing off till I see you next time. Thanks, guys.